Millionaire is sentenced to pay $659 million until a poor 7-year-old girl says something that leaves everyone pale in court. Before we reveal this poignant story of loneliness and pain, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. The gavel strikes 3 times, echoing through the packed Manhattan courthouse like thunder. The defendant, Michael Harrison, is hereby ordered to pay $659 million in damages for corporate fraud and environmental destruction. The words hit Michael like a physical blow. At 34, the tech billionaire had built an empire worth $2.8 billion, but now watches it crumble in real time. His perfectly tailored navy suit feels like a straitjacket as reporters surge forward, cameras flashing like lightning strikes. His hands shake uncontrollably as he grips the mahogany defendant's table. "This is the largest corporate settlement in New York history," Judge Patricia Coleman announces, her voice cutting through the chaos. Mr. Harrison's company deliberately poisoned 3 residential communities with toxic industrial waste over 5 years, infecting over 10,000 families. The courtroom erupts in cheers, sobs, and angry shouts. In the gallery, victims clutch faded photographs of loved ones lost to cancer, their faces etched with years of suffering and desperate hope for justice. Michael's throat constricts as he sees a woman holding a picture of a young boy who couldn't have been older than 8. His lead attorney, James Morrison, whispers urgently about appeals and legal strategies, but Michael can barely hear over the roar of his collapsing world. The fortune he'd built, through 2 decades of 18-hour days and moral compromises, was finally crashing down around him. The defendant will surrender all assets pending appeal, Judge Coleman continues, her gavel poised to deliver the final blow. "Mr. Harrison, you have systematically poisoned families while hiding behind corporate structures and legal loopholes. This court finds your actions unconscionable." But just as the judge prepares to adjourn, a small voice pierces the courtroom din. "Your Honor, may I speak? Please, it's very important." Every head turns toward the back of the packed courtroom. There, standing on a wooden bench to be seen over the crowd, is a 7-year-old girl with tangled brown hair catching the afternoon light. Her clothes have clearly seen better days. A faded blue dress carefully mended, worn sneakers, and a backpack decorated with rainbow stickers. But it's her eyes that command attention. Bright green eyes holding determination and intelligence that seems impossible for someone so young. Despite her small stature, she radiates a presence that makes seasoned lawyers, hardened reporters, and even the judge pause in recognition of something extraordinary. "Excuse me." Judge Coleman removes her reading glasses, clearly taken aback. "Young lady, this is highly irregular. Court proceedings don't typically allow—" The little girl raises her hand higher, undeterred by the formal setting or hundreds of eyes focused on her. "I have something very important to say about Mr. Harrison. Something that changes everything about this case. Something nobody else knows, but everybody needs to hear." The courtroom falls deadly silent. Michael turns around slowly, his heart hammering, as he studies the child's face with growing confusion and inexplicable recognition. Who is she? Why does she look so familiar? Her features trigger a memory he can't grasp, like trying to remember a dream upon waking. The girl's next words will shake everyone to their core, but the story of how this moment came to be is more extraordinary than anyone could imagine. 6 months earlier, Michael Harrison stood atop his penthouse terrace, 40 floors above Manhattan, watching the city awaken in shades of gold and crimson. The view was breathtaking. Central Park stretched like an emerald carpet. The Hudson River reflected early sunlight like molten silver, and the iconic skyline rose around him like monuments to human ambition. Harrison Technologies occupied 4 gleaming towers in the financial district, each building testament to his relentless drive and brilliant mind. At 34, he commanded a technology empire that had revolutionized data processing for government agencies and Fortune 500 companies worldwide. His innovations in artificial intelligence had earned him comparisons to the great tech visionaries. The morning air carried familiar sounds of New York awakening, distant traffic, construction crews beginning their work, delivery trucks navigating narrow streets. Michael sipped his black coffee, reviewing his tablet with methodical attention to detail that had built his fortune. Stock prices were up 12%, profit margins exceeded projections, and 3 new government contracts worth over $200 million had been secured overnight. The numbers should have filled him with satisfaction, but lately success felt increasingly hollow. "Sir, the emergency board meeting starts in 10 minutes, his assistant Rebecca Chen called from inside, her usually calm voice carrying unusual tension. Rebecca had worked for him 8 years, managing his schedule with military precision. When she sounded worried, there was always good reason. Today's emergency agenda contained the quarterly environmental compliance report, specifically the sanitized version that would hide the devastating truth about their New Jersey waste disposal operations from shareholders, regulators, and the public. Michael had been dreading this meeting for weeks. As he walked through his office, past walls lined with framed awards celebrating his meteoric rise, each accolade felt heavier than usual. Tech Visionary of the Year from Forbes. America's Youngest Billionaire from Fortune. The titles that once filled him with pride now seemed like evidence against his character. The boardroom buzzed with nervous energy when Michael arrived. 12 executives sat around the imported mahogany table, their faces reflecting anxiety, guilt, and moral exhaustion. Everyone knew about the mounting environmental lawsuits, aggressive federal investigations, and growing media attention. More importantly, everyone understood what was truly at stake, not just money, but their freedom, reputations, and ability to sleep without the weight of thousands of poisoned lives pressing down on their consciences. His chief financial officer, David Chen, stood beside a large monitor displaying prepared slides. The data had been massaged, sanitized, and carefully edited by teams of lawyers and environmental consultants whose primary job was not to tell the truth, but to make it legally defensible. "The legal team assures us these community lawsuits will settle quietly," David explained, clicking through charts showing minimal environmental impact. "We're projecting maybe 50 to 70 million in total payouts, spread across multiple small settlements to avoid media attention." Michael's stomach churned as he listened to the sanitized version of their devastating impact. He knew the real numbers were catastrophic. Hundreds of families affected by toxic exposure, dozens of confirmed cancer cases directly linked to their waste disposal, and 3 deaths that haunted his dreams with increasing frequency. After the meeting ended, Michael returned to his private office and opened the wall safe hidden behind false wood paneling. Inside lay a folder marked "New Jersey Facility, Confidential." His breathing became shallow as he pulled out photographs representing reality they'd been running from. Corroded chemical waste barrels in shallow pits, contaminated soil spreading through residential neighborhoods, and most haunting of all, an elementary school playground just 500 yards from their primary illegal dump site. That playground had become the symbol of his guilt. Appearing in nightmares, children laughing while invisible poison filled their lungs with every breath. Emma Rodriguez lived with her mother Maria in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a century-old brick building. Their home was 6 blocks from the contaminated playground that would soon become the center of the biggest environmental lawsuit in New York history. But Emma didn't know that yet. At 7 years old, Emma possessed an extraordinary gift that even child psychologists struggled to explain. Her mind processed complex information with speed and accuracy that defied understanding of cognitive development. She could read at college level, solve mathematical problems that challenged high school students, and most remarkably, see patterns that remained invisible to most adults. The building where they lived was old and worn, with cracked plaster walls and narrow hallways smelling of decades of cooking spices and industrial cleaning products. But Maria kept their small home spotless, transforming two modest rooms into a sanctuary of dignity through determination and endless hours of maintenance. Maria worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat in one of the world's most expensive cities. Before dawn, she cleaned Midtown Manhattan corporate offices. During the day, she stocked grocery store shelves. Most evenings found her waiting tables at an all-night diner, serving truck drivers and night shift workers. Despite working nearly 18 hours daily, Maria never complained in front of her daughter. She understood Emma was special, gifted in ways that deserved every opportunity she could provide. The local public school had recommended testing for advanced programs, but private schools remained financially impossible. "Mama, why do so many people in our neighborhood get sick?" Emma asked one evening, looking up from her advanced mathematics workbook. The public library had started giving her college-level textbooks after she'd worked through their entire elementary collection in 3 months. Maria paused while folding their clean laundry, every piece maintained with meticulous care because replacing anything required careful budgeting. She'd noticed the troubling pattern bothering Emma: unusually high cancer rates among neighbors, respiratory problems affecting entire families, mysterious illness clusters concentrated in their specific area while surrounding neighborhoods remained relatively healthy. Mrs. Patterson from the 4th floor had been diagnosed with lung cancer despite never smoking. The Martinez family's youngest son developed severe asthma, requiring expensive daily medications. Old Mr. Chen, who ran the corner grocery, suddenly closed after being hospitalized for liver problems doctors couldn't explain. "I don't know, Mija," Maria replied softly, her voice carrying years of watching neighbors get sick while feeling helpless to protect her daughter from whatever invisible threat seemed to stalk their community. Sometimes bad things just happen to good people. But Emma wasn't satisfied with vague explanations. Her remarkable mind demanded concrete answers, logical connections, and evidence-based solutions. She spent hours after school at the public library, systematically reading everything available about environmental science, chemistry, toxicology, and public health. Mrs. Patricia Patterson, the librarian, a retired high school science teacher, was continually amazed by the little girl's advanced comprehension and insatiable curiosity about subjects typically interesting only to graduate students. Emma, most college students couldn't understand these peer-reviewed scientific journals, Mrs. Patterson observed one afternoon, watching the 7-year-old take detailed notes about chemical compounds and their long-term health effects. "Are you sure you wouldn't prefer age-appropriate science books?" Emma shook her head with serious determination. "These books contain the specific information I need, Mrs. Patterson. Someone is making people in my neighborhood sick, and I'm going to figure out exactly who is responsible." Her investigation began with methodical approach, careful observation, systematic data collection, and logical analysis. Emma created detailed neighborhood maps using colored pencils, marking every building within a 12-block radius. Then she began documenting illness patterns, using information gathered through neighbor conversations and careful observation of ambulance visits, medical equipment deliveries, and funeral notices appearing with disturbing frequency in building lobbies. The pattern that emerged was both clear and terrifying. Every family affected by cancer, respiratory illness, or unexplained symptoms lived within a specific geographic radius, forming an almost perfect circle around their community with consistency that couldn't be coincidental. At that circle's center sat an abandoned lot that everyone avoided instinctively. The abandoned lot, covering nearly 2 acres, should have been valuable urban real estate. Instead, it remained a wasteland that seemed to repel life itself. The ground was perpetually bare, regardless of season, with no grass growing even during spring months when the rest of the city bloomed. Strange colored puddles appeared after rainstorms, reflecting oily rainbows that seemed beautiful until Emma realized they represented chemical contamination. Emma remembered those nighttime visits from when she was younger. large trucks arriving after midnight when most residents slept, their headlights cutting through darkness as they backed up to the fence, an unloaded cargo they clearly didn't want anyone to see. Her mother had always pulled her away from their apartment window, warning her not to watch or ask questions about things that weren't their business. But now, armed with knowledge from months of library research, Emma realized those nighttime visits represented something far more sinister. Those trucks had been systematically dumping industrial waste in a residential area, poisoning the soil, groundwater and air that thousands of families depended on for survival. One crisp October afternoon, while her mother worked the evening diner shift, Emma made a decision that would change countless lives. Armed with mason jars from their kitchen cabinet, wearing her oldest clothes and carrying a notebook to document findings, she ventured toward the abandoned lot. The fence had multiple holes worn by time and weather. Emma slipped through the largest gap easily, her small size proving advantageous. Up close, the environmental devastation was even more horrifying than she'd imagined. The soil had unnatural grey tint, reminiscent of concrete mixed with ash, and large patches were covered with oily residue that reflected rainbow colors in afternoon sunlight. Emma collected soil samples methodically, filling mason jars from different property areas and labeling each container with careful handwriting, noting exact location and visual characteristics. Even at 7, Emma understood the critical importance of scientific method and proper documentation. The smell was overwhelming as she worked, toxic mixture of chemicals and decay that made her eyes water continuously and throat burn, but she forced herself to complete the sampling process. As she methodically collected evidence, Emma discovered documentation scattered by wind and rain across the property, shipping labels blown free from discarded containers, delivery receipts bearing corporate logos, and official paperwork carelessly left behind by whoever was responsible for the illegal dumping operation. One corporate logo appeared repeatedly on scattered documents: Harrison Technologies, accompanied by a Manhattan Financial District address and official letterhead indicating this was a major corporation with resources to cover up criminal activity. Back at the library, Emma used public computers to research Harrison Technologies and its founder, Michael Harrison. What she discovered made her stomach clench with anger. The company was worth billions, built on lucrative government contracts, while the neighborhood where she lived suffered from consequences of their illegal cost-cutting measures. Harrison Technologies had been profiled in major business magazines as an innovation leader. Michael Harrison featured on Forbes and Fortune covers as a visionary entrepreneur. But nowhere in these glowing profiles was there mention of families poisoned by their waste, communities destroyed by their negligence, or children who would grow up with permanent health problems because corporate executives chose profit over basic human decency. Emma printed every article she could find about Michael Harrison, studying his photograph with the same intensity she applied to scientific journals. Something about his face seemed familiar, triggering a memory she couldn't quite grasp. Had she seen him somewhere before? Her breakthrough came when she cross-referenced shipping dates on discarded receipts with her mother's stories about nighttime truck traffic. The timeline matched perfectly. Harrison Technologies had been using their community as an illegal dump site for nearly 5 years, coinciding exactly with the dramatic surge in health problems that had devastated so many families. But Emma's investigation had attracted attention she hadn't anticipated. Corporate security personnel had noticed unusual activity around their former waste disposal site, and company lawyers were being briefed about potential liability issues. The phone call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, waking Michael from another nightmare about poisoned playgrounds and dying children. His head of security, Thomas Bradley, a former FBI agent specializing in corporate crisis management, spoke with clipped professional tone that meant serious trouble. "Mr. Harrison, we have a significant problem with the New Jersey situation," Bradley reported. Our surveillance team has documented unusual activity around the former disposal site. Someone has been conducting what appears to be a systematic investigation, collecting evidence and asking questions about our company's involvement. Michael sat up in bed, his heart rate accelerating as he contemplated implications of discovery, federal investigations, criminal charges, media exposure, and complete destruction of everything he'd built through 2 decades of calculated risks and moral compromises. "Who is it?" Michael demanded, his voice hoarse with sleep and growing panic. "Environmental groups, government investigators, journalists working on an exposé?" Bradley paused before delivering news that was somehow even more disturbing than Michael had anticipated. "That's the most unusual aspect. Sir, according to our sources and surveillance footage, the person conducting this investigation appears to be a 7-year-old girl." The words hit Michael like a physical blow, leaving him speechless. A child. How could a 7-year-old possibly pose a threat to his billion-dollar corporation and the army of lawyers and security professionals he employed? "That's impossible," Michael finally managed. "Children don't conduct environmental investigations. They don't understand corporate liability or chemical contamination or—" "Sir, I understand how this sounds," Bradley interrupted, "but our intelligence is reliable. The child's name is Emma Rodriguez. She lives 6 blocks from the contamination site with her mother, who works multiple low-wage jobs. According to our research, the girl has been systematically collecting soil samples, mapping illness patterns throughout the neighborhood, and researching our company's connection to the waste disposal operations." The next morning, Michael called an emergency meeting for dawn, assembling his top lawyers, security personnel, and crisis management specialists in his penthouse conference room. The Manhattan skyline provided stunning backdrop, but the view's beauty felt hollow as they gathered to plan what felt like a desperate fight for survival. "Explain to me how a 7-year-old child has uncovered evidence that we've spent millions of dollars to keep buried," Michael demanded, his usual composure cracking under pressure. Dark circles under his eyes revealed sleepless nights haunted by guilt and growing paranoia. James Morrison, his lead attorney, spread documents across the mahogany conference table. "Her name is Emma Rodriguez. She's 7 years old, lives with her mother Maria, who works 3 jobs. The child has been systematically collecting evidence for 4 months, organizing community meetings to help families document their illnesses, and creating detailed maps connecting health problems to our disposal activities." Michael studied Emma's school photograph, obtained through private investigators. Her bright green eyes and serious expression stirred that same inexplicable sense of recognition he'd been experiencing for weeks, a feeling that grew stronger each time he saw her image. "The local media has started calling her the little detective," Morrison continued grimly. "Her story is gaining traction with environmental groups and investigative journalists who smell a major story about corporate environmental crimes." David Chen pulled up news footage on his laptop. "She appeared on Channel 7 News last week, explaining the contamination in terms that made our own environmental consultants look incompetent. This isn't just some precocious child. She comprehends complex environmental science better than most graduate students, and she's using that knowledge to build a case that could destroy everything we've built." The video showed Emma standing confidently before news cameras, her hands gesturing toward hand-drawn charts, mapping contamination spread with remarkable accuracy. Despite her youth and obvious poverty, she spoke with authority about chemical compounds and long-term health effects. "The chemicals from Harrison Technologies' illegal dumping have been poisoning our neighborhood for over 5 years, Emma explained with startling clarity. The company knew this would hurt families, but they continued because illegal disposal was cheaper than following proper protocols. Now people are dying, and someone needs to be held responsible." Michael's chest tightened as he watched, struck by something deeper than Emma's intelligence, the unmistakable sense that he had seen this child before. 3 months before the trial, Michael Harrison made a decision that surprised his advisors. Instead of remaining hidden in his penthouse, he drove alone to Emma's neighborhood in his black Mercedes-Benz, parking at the edge of the community his company had systematically poisoned. The contrast was jarring. His car cost more than most families earned in 2 years, yet as he sat looking out at modest apartment buildings and small businesses, he felt smaller and more vulnerable than ever before. Children played in small front yards, their laughter carrying on air he knew contained invisible poison from his company's negligence. Mothers pushed strollers past buildings where families struggled with medical bills and declining health, unaware that the man responsible for their suffering was watching from yards away. Michael walked slowly toward the abandoned lot where Emma had conducted her investigation. Even from distance, he could see environmental damage, dead soil that couldn't support plant life, unnatural discoloration, and lingering toxic smell that made his eyes water. Security footage had shown Emma working alone at this site, a 7-year-old child collecting evidence that would ultimately destroy his empire while he sat in boardrooms discussing profit margins. She had done what teams of government investigators had failed to accomplish. Armed with nothing but mason jars and intelligence that operated on a completely different level. "You're him, aren't you?" a voice said behind him. Michael turned to find Emma Rodriguez standing on the cracked sidewalk, her school backpack slung over one shoulder and bright green eyes studying him with intensity that made his chest tighten. Up close, she was smaller than expected, but her presence filled the space around them with energy that was both challenging and oddly comforting. This was the child who had unraveled his lies, the brilliant mind that had connected patterns his experts had spent millions trying to hide. "I'm sorry," Michael replied weakly, though his heart raced with certainty that this encounter was somehow inevitable. "Michael Harrison," Emma said simply, her voice carrying neither accusation nor fear. "I've seen your picture in newspapers. You're the man whose company poisoned my neighborhood, made my friends sick, and killed Mrs. Garcia, who used to give me cookies after school." The directness hit him like a physical blow, forcing him to confront reality he'd been avoiding through corporate lawyers and public relations campaigns. No spin, no damage control, just truth delivered with devastating simplicity by a child who understood exactly what he'd done. It's more complicated than that," Michael began weakly, falling back on corporate speak he'd used to justify years of environmental crimes. Emma tilted her head, studying him with expression too mature for her age. "No, Mr. Harrison, it's not complicated. Your company needed to dispose of chemical waste. Legal disposal would have cost money and reduced profits. Illegal disposal in our neighborhood was cheaper because poor people don't have lawyers to fight back. You chose to save money by poisoning families. That's not complicated. That's wrong." Michael found himself unable to look away from her face, struck by features that seemed impossibly familiar. The shape of her nose, the set of her jaw, the way her eyebrows drew together when thinking, everything triggered memories that felt important but remained frustratingly beyond his conscious reach. "Why are you here?" Emma asked, her voice softer but no less penetrating. "Did you come to buy my silence, threaten my family, or did you actually come to see what your company did to real people?" "I wanted to understand," Michael said, words coming out before he could stop them. "I needed to know what we'd done." Emma studied his face, and Michael had the unsettling feeling she could see straight through to his soul, past all the corporate armor he'd built to protect himself from acknowledging the human cost of his success. "You want to understand?" she asked challengingly. "Then come with me. But once you really see what your company did to my neighbors, to my friends, to people I love, you won't be able to pretend it was just business anymore." She turned and began walking toward nearby apartment buildings. They stopped outside a small ground-floor unit, where an elderly woman sat on front steps, an oxygen tank beside her chair. "Mrs. Garcia," Emma said gently, "this is Michael Harrison. He owns the company that made you sick." The elderly woman looked up with tired eyes, holding no anger, just profound sadness. She didn't speak, but her gaze carried weight of countless sleepless nights and knowledge that her remaining time was measured in months. Mrs. Garcia has stage 4 lung cancer, Emma explained quietly. She's lived here 40 years, never smoked, never worked around industrial chemicals. The doctors say it's environmental exposure. She's dying because your company chose profit over human decency. With each stop, each story, each face, Michael felt his psychological defenses crumbling. These weren't statistics. They were real people whose lives had been shattered by his company's systematic poisoning of their environment. "I'm going to make sure you pay for this," Emma said as they returned to his car. "Not just money, real consequences. People need to know what happens when corporations think they can hurt families and get away with it." As Michael drove away, Emma's words echoed in his mind. But it was her face that haunted him most. Those bright green eyes that seemed impossibly familiar, carrying secrets neither of them yet understood. The recognition was growing stronger, more urgent, as if his subconscious was trying to tell him something crucial his conscious mind wasn't ready to accept. The trial was 3 months away, and this remarkable child held the power to destroy everything he'd built. What he didn't know was that their connection ran deeper than corporate crime, deeper than anything either was prepared to discover. 2 weeks after Michael's encounter with Emma, his world continued its relentless collapse. Harrison Technologies' stock price plummeted 40% as news of the environmental lawsuit dominated headlines. Board members called emergency meetings, demanding his resignation, but none of that mattered anymore. Michael couldn't stop thinking about Emma's face and the inexplicable familiarity that haunted his every waking moment. He sat in his penthouse office at 3 a.m., surrounded by boxes of personal documents he'd been sorting through, searching for any clue that might explain his connection to the 7-year-old girl who was destroying his empire. Photo albums, business records, old correspondence, nothing provided answers to the questions burning in his mind. His phone buzzed with another call from James Morrison, but Michael ignored it. His lawyer had been trying to reach him for days, probably with more bad news about the lawsuit or settlement negotiations. Michael no longer cared about legal strategies or damage control. Something much more important was consuming his thoughts. On his desk lay Emma's school photograph, obtained through his private investigators. Her bright green eyes stared back at him, and that familiar ache in his chest intensified. Where had he seen those eyes before? The shape of her face, the way she tilted her head when thinking, everything about her triggered memories that felt crucial but remained maddeningly out of reach. Michael opened another box of documents, this one containing personal papers from his early 20s. His hands trembled as he sifted through bank statements, apartment leases, and medical records from a time in his life he'd tried hard to forget. Those had been dark years before his company's success, when he'd made mistakes that nearly destroyed him. A manila envelope at the bottom of the box caught his attention. His name was written on it in unfamiliar handwriting, with a date from 8 years ago. Michael's heart began racing as he opened it, finding a letter he'd never seen before, and a photograph that made his world stop spinning. The photograph showed a young woman with long brown hair and the most beautiful green eyes he'd ever seen. She was holding a baby, a little girl with the same distinctive features. Michael's hands shook as he read the letter's first line. "Michael, there's something I need to tell you about our daughter." The letter was from Sarah Chen, a woman he'd briefly dated during his company's early struggling years. Michael remembered her, brilliant, kind, but their relationship had ended when his obsession with business success drove everyone away. He'd never known she was pregnant. According to the letter, she'd tried to contact him multiple times, but his assistant had been instructed to screen all personal calls during that crucial period. "I named her Emma," the letter continued. "She's incredibly intelligent, even as a baby. She has your eyes, your intensity, your way of studying everything around her. I know you're busy building your company, but she deserves to know her father. Please call me when you get this. Michael's vision blurred as the pieces fell into place. Emma Rodriguez. Rodriguez was Sarah's maiden name. The familiar features, the extraordinary intelligence, the inexplicable connection he'd felt from the moment he saw her photograph. Emma wasn't just the child who was bringing down his empire. She was his daughter. His phone rang again, Morrison's name flashing on the screen. This time Michael answered. "Michael, thank God," Morrison said, his voice tight with stress. "We need to talk immediately. The prosecution has made an offer, but it's time-sensitive. They want a settlement conference tomorrow morning." "James," Michael interrupted, his voice hollow, "I need you to do something for me. Find everything you can about Sarah Chen. She worked as a research assistant at Columbia University 8 years ago. I need to know what happened to her." There was a pause. "Sarah Chen. Michael, what does this have to do with the lawsuit?" "Everything," Michael whispered, staring at the photograph of the woman he'd loved and lost, holding the daughter he'd never known existed. "It has everything to do with everything." As dawn broke over Manhattan, Michael made a decision that would change both his and Emma's lives forever. But first, he needed to uncover the truth about what had happened to Sarah Chen and why Emma was now living in poverty with a woman named Maria Rodriguez. The next morning, Michael's private investigator delivered a report that shattered what remained of his world. Sarah Chen had died 3 years ago in a car accident, leaving 2-year-old Emma orphaned. With no family able to care for her, Emma had been placed with Maria Rodriguez, Sarah's close friend and co-worker who had volunteered to adopt the brilliant little girl. Michael sat in his office reading the investigation report with growing horror and guilt. Sarah had struggled as a single mother, working multiple jobs to support Emma while pursuing her doctoral degree in environmental science. She'd continued trying to contact Michael for years, but his success had made him increasingly isolated and paranoid about people wanting his money. The report included Sarah's last letter to him, sent just months before her death. "Emma is 4 now, and she's already reading chapter books. She asks about her father sometimes, and I don't know what to tell her. She's going to do incredible things with her life, Michael. She deserves better than growing up thinking her father didn't want her." Michael's chest tightened as he realized the cruel irony of the situation. His daughter, his brilliant, extraordinary daughter, was living in poverty in a neighborhood his company had poisoned. She was fighting for justice against her own father, not knowing their connection. The very chemicals his company had dumped illegally were threatening the health of his child. He immediately called his head of security. "Bradley, I need you to assign a protection detail to Emma Rodriguez and her adoptive mother Maria. Discreet surveillance, but I want to know they're safe at all times." "Sir?" Bradley sounded confused. "The Rodriguez girl? The one leading the lawsuit against us?" "Just do it," Michael snapped. "And I want regular reports on their well-being, medical care, food security, everything. If they need anything at all, I want to know immediately." That afternoon, Michael drove to the cemetery where Sarah was buried. He stood before her simple gravestone, overwhelmed by grief for the woman he'd loved and the years with his daughter he'd lost forever. Guilt consumed him as he thought about Emma growing up believing her father had abandoned her, never knowing he'd never even received the messages about her existence. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered to the stone. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry Emma had to grow up without me. But I'm going to make this right somehow." As he drove back to Manhattan, Michael's phone rang. It was Morrison with an update on the lawsuit. "Michael, the prosecution is pushing hard for the settlement conference tomorrow. They're demanding the full $659 million plus criminal charges. But there's something else. Emma Rodriguez has specifically requested to address the court personally. She wants to make a statement about the impact on her community." Michael's heart stopped. Tomorrow he would face his daughter in court, and she would unknowingly condemn her own father for crimes that had affected her entire life. The irony was devastating. Emma's brilliant investigation had uncovered the truth about his company's environmental crimes. But the biggest truth of all remained hidden. That night, Michael made a decision that would shock everyone who knew him. He called Morrison back. "James, I want to change our strategy completely. No more settlement negotiations, no more legal maneuvering. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell the truth about everything. The illegal dumping, the cover-up, all of it. And I'm going to accept full responsibility for what my company did to Emma's neighborhood." "Michael, that's financial and legal suicide," Morrison protested. "You'll lose everything and probably face decades in prison." "I've already lost everything that matters," Michael replied, looking at the photograph of Sarah and baby Emma. "It's time to do the right thing, even if it's 8 years too late." As he prepared for what might be his last night of freedom, Michael wondered if he would ever find the courage to tell Emma the truth about who he really was. His daughter was about to destroy her own father in court, and she had every right to do so. The morning of the settlement conference, Michael arrived at the courthouse to find hundreds of protesters gathered on the steps. Emma stood at the center of the crowd, addressing reporters with the same intelligence and passion that had made her a media sensation. Watching her from his car, Michael felt a mixture of pride and heartbreak that nearly overwhelmed him. She was so much like Sarah, brilliant, principled, unafraid to fight for what was right. But she was also like him in ways that made his chest ache. The way she analyzed complex problems, her intensity when discussing injustice, her refusal to accept simple answers to difficult questions. She was his daughter in every way that mattered. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The gallery was packed with victims' families, environmental activists, and media representatives. Michael took his place at the defendant's table, acutely aware that his daughter was sitting just 50 feet away, preparing to testify against him. Judge Coleman called the session to order. "Before we begin settlement discussions, I understand Ms. Rodriguez has requested to address the court." Emma stood up, and Michael's breath caught in his throat. Up close, the resemblance to Sarah was even more striking. She had her mother's grace and determination, but her eyes, those bright green eyes that had haunted Michael's dreams, were unmistakably his. "Your Honor," Emma began, her young voice carrying clearly through the packed courtroom, "I want to tell you about my neighborhood and what Harrison Technologies did to the people I love." She spoke about Mrs. Garcia, who had died the previous week from lung cancer. She talked about Tommy's little sister, whose leukemia was getting worse despite expensive treatments. With each story, each name, each face, Michael felt the weight of his crimes settling on his shoulders like stones. "But I also want to talk about something else," Emma continued, her voice taking on a different tone. "I've been thinking a lot about responsibility and what it means to make things right when you've done something terrible." Michael's lawyer shot him a worried glance, but Michael couldn't look away from his daughter. "My mother died when I was 4, Emma said, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. "I never knew my father. For a long time I was angry about that. I thought he must not have cared about me or my mother enough to be part of our lives." The courtroom was completely silent, everyone hanging on every word from this remarkable child. "But Maria, my adoptive mother, taught me something important. She said that sometimes people make mistakes, and sometimes they don't even know they've made them until it's too late. She said, the measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes, but what they do when they finally understand the harm they've caused." Michael's hands shook as Emma's words hit him like physical blows. Was she talking about him? Did she somehow know? "So I want to say this to Mr. Harrison," Emma continued, turning to look directly at him for the first time. "I know you poisoned my neighborhood. I know your company hurt my friends and neighbors. But I also know that everyone deserves a chance to make things right, if they're truly sorry and willing to do whatever it takes to help the people they've hurt." Their eyes met across the courtroom, and Michael saw something in Emma's expression that took his breath away. It wasn't hatred or accusation, it was hope. His brilliant daughter was offering him something he didn't deserve, the possibility of redemption. Judge Coleman looked surprised by Emma's unexpected turn toward mercy rather than condemnation. Miss Rodriguez, are you saying you would support a settlement that includes rehabilitation rather than just punishment? Emma nodded solemnly. I want Mr. Harrison to pay for what he did, but more than that, I want him to help fix the damage and make sure this never happens to any other community. Michael stood up slowly, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone in the courtroom could hear it. Your Honor, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I would like to respond to Miss Rodriguez. The judge nodded. Mr. Harrison, you may address the court. Michael turned to face Emma, seeing so much of Sarah in her expectant expression. The words he'd planned to say disappeared from his mind, replaced by a truth that had been building in his chest for days. Emma, he began, his voice growing stronger, you're right about responsibility and making things right. I poisoned your neighborhood. I covered up the damage. I chose profit over the safety of families, and people died because of my decisions. The courtroom held its collective breath as Michael continued, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. But there's something else I need to tell you, Emma. Something that changes everything, even though it doesn't excuse anything. He paused, looking directly into his daughter's eyes. 8 years ago, I was in love with a woman named Sarah Chen. She was brilliant, unkind, and everything good that I wasn't. When my business started to take off, I became obsessed with success. I pushed everyone away, including Sarah. Emma's face went pale, and Michael saw recognition beginning to dawn in her eyes. Sarah tried to contact me many times over the years, Michael continued, his voice breaking, but I was so focused on building my empire that I never got her messages. I never knew that she was pregnant. I never knew that I had a daughter. The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps, but Michael only had eyes for Emma, who was staring at him with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something that might have been recognition. Emma Rodriguez, born Emma Chen, you are my daughter. The brilliant, extraordinary girl who brought down my company is my own child. The neighborhood I poisoned is where my daughter lives. The people I hurt include the most important person in my world, someone I never even knew existed until a few days ago. Emma swayed slightly, and Maria Rodriguez immediately moved to support her. The older woman's face showed she had suspected this truth for some time. Judge Coleman called for order as the courtroom buzzed with reaction to Michael's stunning revelation. Mr. Harrison, are you saying that the plaintiff in this case is your biological daughter? Yes, Your Honor, Michael replied, never taking his eyes off Emma. And I want her to know that every day I didn't know about her existence was the greatest loss of my life. Every day she grew up without me was a tragedy I'll never forgive myself for. Emma finally found her voice, though it shook with emotion. You're my father, the man who abandoned my mother, who never answered her calls, who let me grow up thinking I wasn't wanted. I never knew, Emma, Michael said desperately. I swear to you, I never knew Sarah was pregnant. I never knew you existed. If I had known, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of your life. But you did know about the dumping, Emma said, her voice growing stronger and more accusatory. You knew you were poisoning the neighborhood where your own daughter lived. Even if you didn't know I was there. Michael nodded, accepting the condemnation he deserved. You're right, I knew, and I chose to hide it rather than fix it. I chose money over the safety of families, including my own family. I am guilty of everything you've accused me of, and more. Emma stood up slowly, her young face showing a maturity far beyond her years. Do you know what the worst part is? She asked, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. It's not that you poisoned my neighborhood. It's not even that you never tried to find me. The worst part is that I've spent my whole life wondering if my father would be proud of me, and now I find out that my father is the kind of man who hurts children for money. The words hit Michael like physical blows, each one deserved and devastating. Emma, No, she interrupted, showing the same fierce determination that had made her investigation so effective. "You don't get to explain this away. You don't get to make this better with words. If you're really my father, if you really want me to believe that you care about me, then prove it." Judge Coleman leaned forward. "Miss Rodriguez, what do you mean?" Emma turned to address the court, but her words were clearly meant for Michael. "I want him to plead guilty to all charges. I want him to pay every penny of the settlement to help the families he hurt. And I want him to spend the rest of his life working to clean up the mess he made, even if it means going to prison." She paused, looking directly at Michael again. "If you're really my father, if you really love me, then do the right thing for once in your life. Take responsibility for what you've done and help me fix the damage you caused." The courtroom was completely silent as Michael stared at his daughter, this remarkable, brilliant girl who had somehow found the strength to offer him a path to redemption even as she condemned his actions. "Your Honor," Michael said quietly, "I would like to change my plea to guilty on all charges, and I would like to request that my daughter Emma Rodriguez be appointed as a special advisor to oversee the cleanup and restoration efforts, with full authority to ensure that my company's resources are used to help the families we've harmed." Emma's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time since learning the truth, Michael saw something other than disappointment in his daughter's expression. It might have been surprise or respect, or perhaps the beginning of something that could one day become forgiveness. But he knew he had a long road ahead of him to earn the right to call himself Emma's father. 1 month after the shocking courtroom revelation, Michael Harrison sat in a small conference room in the federal courthouse, no longer the powerful billionaire who had once commanded a technology empire. His assets had been liquidated, his company dissolved, and his personal wealth redistributed to the families affected by his environmental crimes. But for the first time in years, he felt something approaching peace. Across the table sat Emma, now officially recognized as his daughter and appointed by the court as a special advisor to oversee the cleanup efforts. In the month since learning the truth about their relationship, they had met twice a week to discuss the restoration project, but their interactions remained formal and businesslike. Emma was polite but distant, treating him like any other defendant rather than her father. "The soil remediation is ahead of schedule," Emma reported, reviewing her notes with the same methodical precision that had made her environmental investigation so effective. "The contractors you recommended have removed over 300 tons of contaminated material, and the new groundwater filtration system should be operational by next month." Michael nodded, studying his daughter's face as she spoke. She had grown visibly in the past month, not just physically but emotionally. The weight of learning her father's identity, combined with her responsibilities overseeing the cleanup, had added a new dimension of maturity to her already remarkable presence. "What about the medical fund?" Michael asked. "Are the families getting the care they need?" "Mrs. Patterson started her cancer treatments last week," Emma replied. "Tommy's sister Sarah is responding well to the new experimental therapy, and 15 other families have received comprehensive health screenings. The fund should cover ongoing medical costs for at least 10 years. They worked through the technical details of the restoration project for another hour. Their conversation focused entirely on logistics and timelines. But as Emma gathered her papers to leave, Michael found the courage to address the elephant in the room. "Emma," he said softly, "I know these meetings are difficult for you. If you'd prefer to work with my lawyers directly—" "No," Emma interrupted, looking up from her backpack. "I need to see that you're really committed to fixing this. Words are easy, Mr. Harrison. Actions are what matter." The formal way she addressed him stung, but Michael understood why she couldn't bring herself to call him Dad or even Father. He had to earn those titles. "I want you to know," Michael continued, "that I've started reading everything I can about environmental science. I'm trying to understand what you understood when you were 7 years old, how my company's actions affected real people's lives." Emma studied his face for a long moment. "Why?" she asked simply. "Because I want to be the kind of person you could be proud to call your father," Michael admitted. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I want to deserve it someday." For the first time since learning the truth, Emma's expression softened slightly. "Maria says you've been sending money for my education," she said quietly. Michael nodded. "The private school you're attending now has resources that can challenge your extraordinary mind, and the college fund should cover any university you choose, including graduate school." "Why are you doing this?" Emma asked, her voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than accusation. "Because you're my daughter," Michael said simply. "Because I missed the first 7 years of your life, and I can't get those back. Because I want to help you become everything you're capable of becoming, even if I don't get to be part of that journey." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing his words with the same careful consideration she applied to complex scientific problems. "I've been thinking about something," she finally said. "Maria told me about my mother, how she tried to contact you for years, how she never gave up believing that you would want to know about me." Michael's throat tightened at the mention of Sarah. "She kept all your pictures," Emma continued, "articles about your company, photos from business magazines. She wanted me to know who my father was, even if you didn't know about me." "She was an extraordinary woman," Michael said quietly. "You have her kindness, her strength, her commitment to justice." "But I have your stubbornness too," Emma said, and Michael was surprised to see the hint of a smile on her face. "Maria says I get that intensity from you, the way I dive into problems and won't let go until I solve them." "Is that such a bad thing?" Michael asked. Emma considered this carefully. "It depends on what you use it for," she replied. "You used your intensity to build a company that hurt people. I used mine to stop you. The same trait, but completely different outcomes." The insight was so mature, so thoughtful, that Michael felt a surge of pride in his remarkable daughter. "You're going to change the world, Emma," he said. "You already have." As Emma prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Mr. Harrison," she said, then stopped and corrected herself. "Michael, I want you to know that I don't hate you. I'm disappointed and I'm angry about the lost years, but I don't hate you." "That means more to me than you know," Michael replied. "But earning my respect, earning the right to be called my father, that's going to take time. Maybe years, maybe forever." Michael nodded, accepting the harsh reality of his situation. "I understand, and I'll wait as long as it takes, even if it's forever." After Emma left, Michael sat alone in the conference room, thinking about the long road ahead. He faced at least 5 years in federal prison, the complete loss of his fortune, and the possibility that his daughter might never fully forgive him. But for the first time in his adult life, he was exactly where he belonged. Not at the top of a corporate empire built on lies and exploitation, but at the bottom, working to earn redemption one day at a time. 2 years later, Michael Harrison stood in the community garden that had been built on the site of the former illegal dump. The soil that had once been poisoned with industrial chemicals now grew vegetables, flowers and fruit trees tended by neighborhood families. Children played on new playground equipment installed with funds from his liquidated assets, their laughter echoing across land that had been transformed from a source of sickness into a symbol of renewal. Emma, now 9 years old and even more remarkable than before, stood beside him, examining a soil sample under a portable microscope. She had insisted on conducting quarterly environmental tests to ensure the cleanup remained effective, and her reports had become models for environmental restoration projects across the country. "The pH levels are perfect," Emma announced, looking up from the microscope with satisfaction, "and the heavy metal concentrations are well below federal safety standards. The remediation is holding." Michael smiled, watching his daughter work with the same methodical precision that had first brought down his company and then helped restore the community it had damaged. In the 2 years since their first meeting, their relationship had evolved slowly from formal cooperation to something approaching genuine connection. Dr. Peterson says my application to the Advanced Environmental Science program was accepted, Emma said, referring to the university professor who had been mentoring her through a special program for exceptionally gifted children. That's wonderful, Michael replied. You'll be the youngest student they've ever admitted to graduate-level courses. I want to specialize in environmental restoration, Emma continued. Specifically, finding ways to clean up industrial contamination in low-income communities. Michael felt a surge of pride mixed with the familiar ache of regret. His daughter was dedicating her extraordinary talents to fixing the kind of damage he had caused, and he couldn't help but wonder how different the world might have been if he had known her from the beginning. Emma, he said carefully, there's something I want to ask you, but I'll understand if you're not ready. She looked up from the soil sample, giving him her full attention with the same intensity she applied to scientific problems. I'm being released from federal custody next month, Michael continued. I'll be on probation for 3 more years, and I'll be working full-time for the Environmental Restoration Foundation we established. But I'll have weekends free, and I was wondering, would you like to spend some time together? Maybe I could help with your science projects, or we could visit other restoration sites, or just be father and daughter, Emma finished for him. Michael nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. Emma was quiet for a long moment, considering his request with the same careful analysis she applied to everything else in her life. I've been thinking about that too, she finally said. Maria thinks it's time. She says you've proven that you're really committed to making things right. What do you think? Michael asked. I think, Emma paused, choosing her words carefully. I think that 2 years ago I had a father who was a criminal and a stranger. Today I have a father who is trying to be a better person and who wants to be part of my life. That's progress. Michael felt tears welling up in his eyes. Does that mean? It means I'd like to try, Emma said simply. I'd like to get to know who you really are. Now that you're not hiding behind a corporation and lies, I'd like to see if we can be a family. I'd like that too, Michael whispered. More than anything, Emma smiled, the first genuinely warm smile she had ever directed at him. But I have conditions, she added, and Michael couldn't help but laugh at her business-like tone. Of course you do. What are they? First, no more secrets, ever. If I ask you a question, you tell me the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. Agreed. Second, you have to keep working on restoration projects. This isn't just a job for you. It's who you are now. You're the man who cleans up environmental damage, not the man who causes it. Absolutely. And third, Emma said, her voice becoming softer, you have to tell me about my mother. Everything you remember about her. The good and the bad. I want to know who she was, and I want to understand how she could love someone who became the person you used to be. Michael nodded, his throat tight with emotion. She saw the best in people, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. She would have been so proud of who you've become, Emma. She would have been amazed by your strength, your intelligence, your commitment to justice. Do you think she would have forgiven you? Emma asked quietly. Michael considered the question carefully. I think Sarah would have wanted me to become the man I'm trying to be now. She would have wanted us to be a family, even if it took years to get there. Emma looked around the community garden, at the children playing where industrial waste had once poisoned the soil, at the families tending vegetables where chemicals had once leaked into groundwater. She would have liked this place, Emma said. She would have liked seeing something beautiful grow where there used to be something harmful. Yes, Michael agreed. She would have loved seeing what you've accomplished. As they prepared to leave the garden, Emma surprised Michael by reaching out and taking his hand. It was the first time she had ever initiated physical contact, and the simple gesture meant more to him than all his former wealth and success combined. Dad, she said, testing the word carefully, I think Mom would be proud of both of us. Michael squeezed his daughter's hand gently, finally understanding that redemption wasn't something you achieved. It was something you lived, one day at a time, one right choice at a time, one moment of connection at a time. Yes, he said, looking at the remarkable young woman who had saved not just her community, but her father's soul. I think she would be. As they walked home together through the neighborhood that had been transformed from a site of environmental devastation into a thriving community, Michael Harrison finally understood what true success looked like. It wasn't measured in stock prices or corporate empires. It was measured in the trust of a daughter who had every reason to hate him, but had chosen love instead. The prodigy who had brought down his criminal empire had also shown him the path to becoming the father he should have been all along. And for the first time in his life, Michael Harrison was exactly who he was meant to be.